Mark, a recent editorial suggested that supplements in general, just a waste of money, didn't do any good. Story received a lot of attention in the media. What's your take on that?
You know, people are allowed in a free country to express their opinion. And they're entitled to their own opinion. But they're not entitled to their own facts. And what happens in some of the editorials that I've seen regarding dietary supplements, particularly on herbal dietary supplements, actually are erroneous as far as some of the facts that they state. Some of these negative op-ed pieces have stated, like, for example, on a safety-related basis, two of them, one in USA Today and one in New York Times, said there was 50,000 adverse event reports per year reported to the Food and Drug Administration on adverse effects of dietary supplements. Even some of my colleagues at the Food and Drug Administration don't know deny that that's the case. It turns out that 50,000 figure came from a 2000 report, year 2000, by the Food and Drug Administration on adverse effects of vaccines and prescription drugs, or biologics and vaccinations and prescription drugs. In other words, it had nothing to do with dietary supplements. So I don't know how it is that some of these op-ed writers, a physician writing in the USA Today in the fall of 2013, another writing in the New York Times, would take that figure, which is so erroneous and so unrelated to dietary supplement safety, and report it in that, and how the newspapers allowed them to do it, which raises another question. When people write op-ed pieces, certainly they're allowed to have their own opinion, and they should be able to express it, whatever that opinion is. And the question then is, do members of major media, like New York Times, USA Today, and others, have a responsibility to somehow appropriately fact-check those items that are on the op-ed pages and treat them to similar or the same criteria of presumably objective fact-checking and insurance of their accuracy that they would normally, to which they would normally subject an article on any other page of that same publication. And this is problematic because they apparently don't do this. So you end up having this 50,000 figure become a statistic because it was in the USA Today or the New York Times when it was a misreported piece of information in an editorial by someone who was misinformed, and the paper just didn't check it out. So that's one thing in response to your question about what do I think or how do I feel about some of these editorials. One editorial that came out that got a lot of traction, I think it was called "Skip the Supplements," by a leading critic of the alternative medicine movement and of dietary supplements, a physician, basically stated that any of these dietary supplements that have a pharmacological effect, and of course they would presumably have, many of them have a pharmacological effect that goes beyond conventional nutrition. So we're not talking about vitamin A, B, C, D, E, what they call your alphabet or your letter vitamins, and some of the other nutritional items. They said if these things have a pharmacological effect, they should be regulated as drugs. Now, this goes back to the debate that we had 20 years ago in 1992, 93, and 94, when there was debate in the culture, in the country, and in Congress about setting up the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 so that there would be some way for dietary supplements to be sold and for consumers to have access to the supplements and the information on the supplements without these supplements, if they have some kind of health benefit, being treated or seen as a drug or regulated as a drug, which in many cases would require extensive cost and time and testing just to be able to sell garlic in a capsule, which I don't think anybody would rationally propose. So the idea that anything that has a pharmacological effect should be ipso facto a drug flies in the face of reason. We have a number of, and this is what is being proposed in some of these op-ed pieces that are critical of the dietary supplement movement and saying people should not take any dietary supplements at all. They say that they're not regulated. They are regulated. They may not be regulated as medicines, but they are not medicines under the law. They are foods under the law. There's a special category of foods. They say these products have no benefit. That is certainly debatable because there's a growing body of scientific and clinical evidence that supports the safety and the physiological benefits or health benefits of a number of dietary supplements, including many herbals that are dismissed by some of these editorial writers. And the idea that something has a physiological or pharmacological effect makes it automatically a drug makes you wonder, well, how do we deal with coffee in our culture? Coffee has a pronounced physiological or pharmacological effect. It's a stimulant. Nobody's suggesting that coffee be regulated as a drug. Nobody suggests that Starbucks has to get a drug license like a drugstore and become a Walgreens, although I wouldn't be surprised to find a Starbucks in a Walgreens or whatever, because they're everywhere else. And nobody's suggesting that prunes should come with a label warning about being a laxative. Everybody knows that prunes and prune juice are a laxative, and these are two common foods with known pharmacological effects. Let's go to another food, chocolate or cocoa, or especially the high flavanol-rich cocoa, the dark chocolate. Study after study shows numerous cardiovascular benefits for the high flavanol-rich dark chocolate, not the white chocolate, not the milk chocolate, but the dark chocolate. Particularly in the cardiovascular area of blood pressure. High flavanol-rich dark chocolate actually has been shown in numerous clinical studies that have been reviewed and clustered and meta-analyzed to have a mild blood pressure lowering effect. According to the logic, or the lack of logic, I think, that's being proposed in some of these op-ed pieces that you're asking about, chocolate, coffee, and prunes would all have to get licensed as a medicine from the Food and Drug Administration, so for people to derive some benefit from them, and that because they have a, quote, pharmacological effect, unquote. I don't think any rational American would support through the idea that they're going to be taxed so that the federal government would start requiring these common foods to be sold as medicines and required to be registered as medicines. Now, let's take another look at what's going on with the herbal market. If you look at the top 20 best-selling herbal products, single herbal dietary supplements in pharmacies, drugstores, supermarkets, mass market retailers, or the ones that are sold in health food stores, the top 20, and there's a different mix in the health food market versus the mainstream market because these products, the consumers in these different market channels have different preferences, so you don't see the same top sellers in the two market channels. About 7 or 8 of the top 20 in each of these market channels, and maybe more in the health food stores, are actually traditional conventional foods or spices. Soy, cranberry, garlic, ginger, turmeric, it's a bilberry, which is a form of European blueberry, and others. These are conventional foods or spices or whatever. These are not some kind of exotic product that comes out of the heart of Africa or the Amazon jungle or whatever that we have to be careful about because we've never seen these before. We haven't been exposed to them in North America or whatever. These are part of our diet. We've had them in our diet for decades, if not hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years. So it's interesting to note, I think it's important to recognize that some of the top-selling herbs in the United States are foods and spices that are, in many cases, concentrated into or powdered herbs in a capsule or tablet, or in some cases concentrated into various extracts for various beneficial effects.